woman who follows the crowd will usually go no further than the crowd. The woman who walks alone is likely to find herself in places no one has ever been before. Albert Einstein. Have you ever wondered why some women live alone? No boyfriend, no partner, not even appearing like they're searching for one? The answer isn't loneliness, heartbreak, or lack of options. It lies in something more disruptive, more unsettling, something that challenges everything we were taught about a woman's role in the world. Because when a woman chooses solitude, she's not getting lost. She's coming home to herself. And that kind of self-return doesn't arrive with applause, likes, or companionship. It arrives in silence, in strength, in a kind of internal freedom most people still struggle to understand. No, she's not lonely. She's selective. She's not cold. She's simply done burning brightly for those who never cared to feel the warmth. There's something deeply threatening about a woman who doesn't need a relationship to feel whole. She breaks the rules of dependency. She dissolves the myth of emotional neediness. She exposes a painful truth that most men don't know how to hold space for a woman who doesn't need saving. And most women are only just beginning to recognize themselves in that fierce, quiet mirror of autonomy. Carl Jung once said, "Everything that irritates us about others can lead us to an understanding of ourselves." These solitary women, they are not outliers. They are reflections of the collective unconscious. They represent what many dream of becoming, but few dare to embody. They don't shout to be loved. They whisper their boundaries. They don't decorate themselves to be chosen. They withdraw to protect what's sacred. They are no longer interested in charming princes. They are more invested in their own peace. And that makes people uncomfortable. Because while the world urges us to rush toward partnership, these women have discovered the rare power of standing still with themselves. A woman who lives alone is not lost. She's operating at a frequency most aren't tuned into. A frequency where nothing is begged for, it's chosen. Where approval is irrelevant and presence is more than enough. And maybe that's why she invites so much commentary, criticism, judgment, confusion. But behind what looks like absence is presence. Fierce, grounded, unapologetic presence. She's not looking for any kind of love. She wants a love that won't shrink her. And until it arrives, she remains whole. You might not get it yet. You might think it's just pride, just damage, just a phase. But somewhere deep in you, maybe in the place you don't often go, a quiet question is forming. What if her silent path is actually the only one that leads to the kind of love we all secretly want? The kind that starts with ourselves. The silence that surrounds a woman who lives alone is not emptiness, it's a sanctuary. And those who don't understand the value of that space often mislabel her. They call her cold, distant, detached. Some even mistake her self-containment for arrogance. But what most don't see is that she didn't build her inner fortress to shut the world out. She built it to keep herself in. She built it after years of getting lost in other people's stories, dimming her own light to make others comfortable, forgetting what her own voice sounded like. That silence she now protects so fiercely, it's sacred. And sacred things aren't meant for everyone. Carl Jung once said, "Everything we do not confront in ourselves, we project onto others." Maybe that's why so many women still confuse solitude with absence, because they haven't yet dared to face themselves in the quiet. They fill the silence with noise, the space with distractions, the loneliness with anything that promises escape. But this woman, the one who lives alone, turned inward. She looked into the depths of her own unconscious, and there, in that vast interior landscape, she met the ghosts she had long avoided. Childhood wounds, unspoken abandonments, attachments disguised as love. Pain passed down like heirlooms from women before her who never got the chance to break the cycle. Her decision to be alone didn't come from bitterness. It came from a scar that finally healed. She didn't give up on love. She simply stopped accepting what others called love when it left her feeling smaller, emptier, or erased. This woman knows chaos. She's loved until she forgot herself. She's given too much. She's begged for crumbs that never should have been offered in the first place. But at some point, she stopped bleeding for people who weren't even willing to hold a bandage. At some point, she woke up. And that awakening wasn't a single lightning bolt. It was slow, incremental, a quiet series of realizations. Disappointments that used to cut deep eventually stopped hurting and started teaching. What you see now isn't aloofness, it's emotional maturity. And emotional maturity is often misinterpreted because it doesn't chase, doesn't beg, and doesn't explain itself. She's not unreachable. She's no longer available for superficiality. She no longer accepts partial love. What she seeks now is depth, and depth is a territory that scares many away. She no longer believes in fairy tales, but she still believes in connection. Only now it must be real. It must be reciprocal. It must be rooted. If it isn't, she'd rather be alone. She doesn't want just any kind of company. She wants reciprocity. Not attention, not approval, but resonance. She's not drawn to promises anymore. She's drawn to presence, to someone who can meet her where she's already arrived. Not to rescue her, not to complete her, but to witness her fully. And maybe that's why she seems intimidating to some. Not because she's harsh or unapproachable, but because she no longer bends herself to fit into someone else's mold. She doesn't shrink to become digestible. She doesn't play small to make others comfortable. What once looked like effort to be loved, now looks like effortlessness to be whole. This woman has no interest in being saved. She's already done the saving for herself. And that kind of wholeness, that kind of self-containment, it unsettles people. Because we live in a world where many relationships are built on need, not choice. On filling voids, not sharing overflow. And when someone doesn't need you to complete them, when they come to you already full, it forces you to meet them with integrity, or walk away. So many give up, not because she is too much, but because they are still living in halves, searching for someone to fix them. But she is no longer in the business of repair. She's not looking to adopt a project. She's looking for a partner. When a woman becomes whole, she becomes polarizing. She awakens two reactions, admiration or fear. Admiration from those on a similar journey. Fear from those still hiding behind emotional dependency. She doesn't want to complete anyone. She wants to overflow, beside someone who is also overflowing. Someone who has walked into their own depths, faced their own shadow, and returned with something real to offer. Until that soul appears, she chooses to remain alone. Not out of pride, not out of rebellion, but out of loyalty to her own becoming. The woman who lives alone isn't hiding from the world. She's protecting her center. There's a profound difference between isolation and preservation. And yet, society often fails to make that distinction. To a world obsessed with constant connectivity and validation, her solitude appears suspicious, cold, even selfish. But what people don't see is the truth. She didn't retreat to shut others out. She stepped back so she wouldn't lose herself in the noise. Carl Jung once said that everything we fail to face within ourselves, we end up projecting onto others. That's exactly what happens when people misread her silence. They call it emptiness. They label her too distant, too picky, too proud. But what they're really seeing is a mirror, one that reflects what they haven't yet dealt with inside. While most search externally for identity, through relationships, through attention, through approval, this woman turned inward. And in that quiet space, in the wilderness of her own psyche, she confronted what others spend a lifetime avoiding. She met her ghosts, childhood wounds that never healed, old abandonment that disguised itself as love. The toxic conditioning that taught her worth had to be earned through sacrifice. Her solitude isn't a result of heartbreak, it's a result of healing. She's not bitter, she's clear. She doesn't reject love, she's just no longer willing to call chaos love. She stopped accepting emotional half-measures. She stopped confusing attention with affection. And in doing so, she made a decision. Not to let anyone into her life who diminishes her just to feel more powerful. This is why she feels different now. This is why she no longer participates in the same conversations. She's no longer interested in games, in people who say the right things but live the wrong way. Her energy has become expensive, and she spends it wisely. Where she once poured herself out hoping to be chosen, she now pours inward, growing roots so deep that no storm can shake her. And yet, this strength she's cultivated isn't loud. It's not about armor or aggression. It's a quiet dignity, a kind of presence that doesn't ask for recognition, because it's already enough for her to know she hasn't abandoned herself. It's easy to misinterpret her stillness, her boundaries, her silence. People say she's closed off, that she's cold. But coldness doesn't describe her. Clarity does. What looks like distance is actually discernment. What seems like emotional unavailability is the result of emotional wisdom. This woman has loved before, deeply, blindly, wholeheartedly. She's walked through the fire of giving too much, of staying too long, of hoping someone would finally see her for who she really is. And each time she wasn't seen, something inside her didn't just break, it awakened. Slowly, her longing for connection turned into a need for truth. Not attention, not flattery, but presence. Real, grounded presence. Now she no longer romanticizes potential. She pays attention to patterns. She doesn't get swept away by words. She watches for consistency. Her past didn't make her hard, it made her honest. And in a world that values performance over authenticity, honesty often feels like rejection. She knows what it's like to be the woman who waits, who bends, who forgives things that shouldn't have been forgiven, just to keep the illusion alive. And she knows the cost, her peace, her self-trust, her inner light. That's a price she refuses to pay again. So when she walks away now, it's not out of anger, it's out of alignment. When she says no, it's not rejection, it's self-preservation. She's not building walls, she's building thresholds. And only those who carry real depth, who have done the work, who don't mistake intensity for intimacy, only they get to cross. To some, that's intimidating. But she's no longer here to make others comfortable. She's not trying to be easy to love, she's trying to be impossible to lie to. Because what she's protecting now isn't just her heart, it's her wholeness. There's a world of difference between isolation and preservation. But most people can't tell the difference. When a woman chooses solitude, the world often assumes she's running from something. But she's not running. She's rooting. She's not escaping intimacy. She's refining her relationship with it. Because she's been through the kind of relationships that leave you more alone than solitude ever could. The ones that drain your light while pretending to reflect it. The ones that offer presence without connection, conversation without listening, a body without a soul. So now she chooses solitude not as a fallback, but as a sanctuary. It's where she can hear herself think, where she can breathe without performing, where she can stretch into her full being without editing any part of herself to make someone else feel safe. Most people fill their silence with noise, texts, dates, distractions. But she's learned to fill hers with reflection, with stillness, with self-confrontation. And in that silence, she's not becoming smaller, she's becoming more rooted, more whole, more fe. She's not preparing herself to be loved, she's loving herself now. In the middle of the becoming, not as a prelude to a future relationship, but as a relationship in itself. And that changes everything. It means she's not desperate for company. It means she's not afraid of missing out. It means she'll never again confuse closeness with connection. She doesn't need a warm body next to her to feel warmth. She creates her own. And when the right connection comes, if it comes, it won't be to fill a void. It will be an overflow. Not a rescue mission, but a resonance. Until then, she remains loyal. Not to the idea of a partner, but to the integrity of her own soul. Her peace wasn't gifted. It was forged. She didn't simply wake up one day as this grounded, radiant woman. No, she became her by descending into the depths of herself, into the parts no one claps for, into silence, into loneliness, into all the patterns she once mistook for love. Carl Jung wrote that the tree that grows to heaven must also send its roots to hell. That's what she did. She went down into inherited wounds, into the scripts passed down by generations of women, taught to settle, taught to serve, taught to smile through betrayal. She examined the roles she'd been given. Lover, pleaser, healer, caregiver. Then slowly she began returning them. Not out of bitterness, but out of clarity. She stopped agreeing to roles that suffocated her. She stopped mistaking sacrifice for love. She stopped confusing being chosen with being respected. And in that undoing, in that fierce deconstruction of false identities, she began to build something new. She learned to be alone without feeling abandoned, to speak without apologizing, to love without losing herself. She discovered the difference between connection and attachment. Between someone who adds to her peace and someone who simply distracts her from her loneliness. Her transformation wasn't cosmetic. It wasn't about attitude. It was existential, archetypal, soul level. She tapped into a knowing older than words, a memory buried deep in the bones of all women, that they are not here to be shaped but to create, not here to be tamed but to awaken. Now, her life is a reclamation. Her solitude is sacred. Her silence is powerful. Her presence? It doesn't beg, it beckons. She's not unreachable. She's just no longer available for anything that dishonors who she's become. People try to label her cold, difficult, aloof. But those labels don't land, not because they're wrong, but because they're irrelevant. She no longer lives through the eyes of others. She sees through her own, and in doing so, changes everything. There's something sacred about the way she moves now. It's not loud, it's not boastful, but it's unmistakable. Wherever she goes, the energy shifts, not because she demands attention, but because she no longer requires it. Carl Jung said that everything we face within becomes our destiny. And because she faced it all, the heartbreak, the abandonment, the false starts, the buried shame, her destiny is no longer something written for her by others. It's authored from within. She doesn't chase validation. She doesn't fish for attention. She doesn't bend to stay wanted. That version of her is gone. Now she chooses, carefully, deliberately, not from lack, but from fullness. She's not looking for someone to save her. She already did that herself. She's not waiting to be loved. She's become love in motion. What she seeks now isn't completion. It's resonance, alignment, that rare, quiet magic that happens when two whole people meet, not to fix or fill, but to witness and expand each other. And because of that, her no is sacred. It's not rejection. It's preservation. When she declines an invitation, ends a conversation, walks away from an opportunity that doesn't sit right. It's not drama. It's discernment. Her nervous system is no longer a battlefield. Her time is no longer currency for someone else's comfort. She no longer negotiates with her intuition. Some see her as intimidating, but intimidation is just the reflection of unresolved shadows. What people call too much is often a woman who is finally just enough for herself. Of course, there are still moments. Nights when the silence echoes a little louder. Days when the old patterns knock on the door of memory. But she doesn't open the door. Not anymore. Because she remembers what it cost to finally come home to herself. Her life is no longer a stage. She's done performing. She doesn't want an audience. She wants a witness. And she's willing to wait. Not out of fear, but out of reverence for everything it took to become this version of herself. The woman who lives alone without a man isn't defined by her solitude. She's defined by what that solitude has allowed her to uncover. She no longer lives according to inherited scripts, fairy tale timelines, or society's fearful whisper that says, "You're running out of time." Time for her has become sacred, not a race, but a rhythm. Carl Jung taught that the individuation process, the journey toward wholeness, demands that we descend into ourselves, face our shadow, integrate what we find, and emerge with something unshakable, identity. And this woman has done just that. Not in one moment of awakening, but over countless quiet reckonings. She's no longer the woman who doubted her worth when she wasn't chosen. She's the woman who chooses. Every love story she once dreamt of has been rewritten. The desperate need to be wanted, gone. The hunger for approval, faded. The illusion that suffering is a sign of devotion, destroyed. In its place, a new script. One where the protagonist doesn't need to be rescued, doesn't exist to complete another, but instead lives fully, breathes deeply, and only lets love in when it feels like peace, not rescue. She is not hard to love, but she will not allow herself to be loved in the old ways. She no longer tolerates inconsistent affection, performative intimacy, or emotional shortcuts. What she seeks now is real, the kind of real that's built slowly, with honesty, with self-awareness, with emotional fluency. The kind of love that doesn't just adore her light, but respects her darkness. And if that doesn't arrive, she will not break, because her life isn't on pause. She is not waiting, she is living. Her days are full, her presence is rooted, and her future is unwritten, by design. If love comes, it must walk beside her, not ahead or behind. It must be mature enough not to need fixing, and wild enough to meet her depth. She is not the same woman who once begged for love with shaky hands. That woman shed her skin in the fires of disappointment and emerged in clarity. What you see now is a woman who chose herself, who bled for that choice, and who will never again apologize for the peace she paid so dearly to find. She didn't choose solitude because she gave up on love. She chose it because she refused to give up on herself. In a world that tells women to chase, to compromise, to become palatable, she chose to become whole. This isn't the end of her story. It's the reclamation of the pen. She is the author now. And every quiet morning, every boundary held, every moment she chooses peace over performance, she writes another line in a life that no longer waits to be completed. Her story is not a warning, it's an invitation. To rise, not in rebellion, but in reverence. To live, not for permission, but for presence. To love, not from longing, but from overflow. So if you're watching this and something stirred in you, a recognition, a memory, a longing, sit with it. Don't rush it away. That quiet ache you feel, it might be the beginning of your own becoming. And when the world asks you why you're still alone, let your stillness answer. You are not behind. You are not broken. You are not missing anything. You are a woman who chose to return to herself. And that is a revolution.